Dara stood by the window of her spacious Lagos apartment, gazing at the rain-slicked streets below. She held the envelope in her hands, the familiar school crest of St. Joseph's College Akoma embossed on the corner. It felt strange in her hands, as though it had traveled through time to reach her. An unwelcome reminder of a past she wasn't sure she wanted to revisit. It had been 20 years since she'd walked the polished halls of that all-girls boarding school, and yet the memories felt both vivid and distant. 20 years since she'd fought tooth and nail to maintain her independence in the face of peer pressure and strange traditions. 20 years since she'd almost fallen prey to Chinny's temptations. Opening the envelope slowly, Dara pulled out the glossy card inside. It read, St. Joseph's College Akoma Reunion 20 Years of Sisterhood. Come and reconnect. Underneath, the date and location of the event were printed. A flurry of emotions bubbled to the surface: excitement, curiosity, and something darker, like an itch she couldn't scratch. She had always prided herself on leaving her school days behind, especially the more unpleasant parts, but there was a pull in that invitation. A need to reconnect with old friends and maybe, just maybe, to face the past she had run from. As she set the invitation down on the glass coffee table, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kamsi, her best friend back in the day, the only one who had never stopped trying to stay in touch. Kamsi. Got my invite for the reunion. You're coming, right? It's going to be so much fun, babe. I heard Chinny's going to be there too. Can you imagine? Chinny. Her name alone sent a shiver down Dara's spine. Dara. I don't know. Haven't decided yet. Kamsi's response came in quick. Come on. It'll be just like old times. We'll laugh about all the silly stuff, see what everyone's been up to. And hey, you might even enjoy seeing old faces. Don't let the past keep you away. Dara closed the chat, turning the phone face down on the table. She tried to smile, but there was a tightness in her chest. She couldn't help but remember Chinny, her cold smile, the way she'd looked at Dara like she was some kind of prize to be claimed. And those stories, the things people had whispered about her late at night in the dorms. Dara had escaped once. Could she escape again? "20 years ago, St. Joseph's College Akoma was considered one of the finest schools for girls in the region. It was a place where young women were molded into proper ladies, disciplined, well-spoken, and prepared for the real world. The boarding house, however, was a world of its own. While the teachers and staff emphasized discipline and education, behind closed doors, there were unwritten rules that governed student life. The halls of the boarding house echoed with the laughter, gossip, and sometimes, the silent tensions of girls growing into their identities. There was the sweet scent of homemade snacks that some girls managed to smuggle in, mingling with the musty odor of old textbooks and linens. Dara remembered how the dormitories were divided, each room assigned by class, with juniors at one end of the building and seniors at the other. But beneath the laughter and studies was the undercurrent of something more complex, something unspoken but known by all. The term soupy was whispered in hushed tones, especially among the juniors. The soupy culture was not just about older girls mentoring the younger ones. It was a world where relationships blurred boundaries, where affection often slipped into something darker and more possessive. At first, Dara had been confused. She was a confident girl, even at that young age, always quick to stand her ground. But she wasn't immune to the subtle pressures that surrounded her. Some of her closest friends had been pulled into the world of soupy. School mothers who were supposed to be mentors began making demands, blurring the lines between friendship, mentorship, and something more physical. Chinny had been one of the most beautiful seniors in school. She was smart, confident, and always surrounded by admirers. Her long dark hair always shone under the harsh dorm lights, and her laugh was intoxicating. Everyone wanted to be close to her, but there was something off about her smile, something that Dara had noticed from the beginning. Chinny had taken an interest in Dara almost immediately. "You have such beautiful legs," she had told Dara one day after class, her hand brushing against her arm. It was a casual compliment, but Dara had felt the weight of it. Soon after, the gifts started. Snacks during break, extra portions during dinner, even a Valentine's Day card that had been larger than anything Dara had ever seen. Her friends had all encouraged her to go along with it. "Chinny is a big deal. Do you know how many girls would kill to be noticed by her?" they had said. Even though she had her reservations, Dara felt the mounting pressure to belong, to fit in. So she had gone to Chinny's dorm room that evening, expecting a simple visit. What she hadn't expected was the carefully draped mosquito nets, the suffocating atmosphere that felt more like a trap than an intimate space. Every fiber of her being had screamed to leave, but she had stayed long enough to realize that the rumors about Chinny were true, that there was something dark about the way she drew people in, and even darker about what she expected from them. That night Dara had lied to escape. She promised herself she wouldn't return, but the weight of that decision had followed her ever since. Over the years, Dara had prided herself on the independence she had forged from that moment. Refusing to let herself be defined by anyone else's expectations, she threw herself into her studies and later her career. She had built a successful business in the bustling heart of Lagos, far away from the memories of boarding school. But no matter how much time passed, the memories lingered at the edge of her mind. In her 20s, she had refused to let herself think about St. Joseph's. The lessons she learned in boarding school were valuable: independence, resilience, and the power of saying no. But they had also come with a cost. Friendships were fragile things, and trust was hard to build after spending years learning to avoid manipulation and deceit. Yet as the years passed, she began to feel something missing. She had never settled down, never let anyone get too close. Relationships in her eyes were opportunities for people to control you, and she had no interest in giving up her autonomy. But the loneliness was harder to ignore as time went on. Sitting in her apartment, staring at the invitation, Dara felt something stir inside her. Perhaps it was time. Time to face the past, to reconnect with the people she had once called friends. Perhaps it was time to see if she could finally close that chapter of her life that had always remained open. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone and typed out a quick message to Kamsi. "Dara, I'll be there." As she pressed send, a sense of unease settled over her. Something told her that going back wouldn't just be about catching up with old friends. It would be about confronting the ghosts that had haunted her for years. Little did she know, the reunion would bring her face to face with not just old memories, but new secrets that had been buried for far too long. The day of the reunion arrived faster than Dara had expected. The week had been a whirlwind of emotions: anticipation, anxiety, curiosity. She had spent sleepless nights wondering what it would feel like to step back into the school where she had lived, studied, laughed, and feared for 6 long years. St. Joseph's College Akoma was a different place now, she had heard. The rumors said it was more modern, stricter, and less traditional, though Dara doubted that certain aspects had changed much. Some things, like the unspoken culture of power and influence among students, ran too deep to be changed by time or new policies. As Dara stepped out of her car and looked up at the towering gates of the school, she felt a pang of nostalgia. The entrance was more polished, and the large, rusting school sign had been replaced with a sleek new one, but the air was thick with memories. She could still hear the distant echoes of excited girls laughing in the distance, the thud of hurried footsteps on the worn gravel, and the faint hum of a dormitory filled with whispers after lights out. She adjusted her outfit, casual but elegant, before stepping through the gates. Her mind raced as she scanned the faces around her, all slightly older, with time etched into the lines of their expressions. Some were vaguely familiar, some completely foreign, and then there was Kamsi. Kamsi's face lit up when she saw Dara approaching, and she rushed over, throwing her arms around her in a warm embrace. "I can't believe you actually came." Kamsi exclaimed, her wide grin never faltering. Dara chuckled softly, trying to shake off the weight of her nervousness. Neither can I, she replied. I guess I just couldn't resist the lure of gossip and old memories. They began to walk together toward the assembly hall, where the reunion was set to take place. The school grounds had changed, but it was still St. Joseph's, the place that had shaped them into the women they had become. As they walked, they caught up on each other's lives. Kamsi had married and was working as a lawyer in Port Harcourt, while Dara shared snippets of her thriving business and life in Lagos. But Kamsi, being Kamsi, quickly changed the subject to something more exciting. You know who's going to be here today, right? She asked with a mischievous smile. Dara raised an eyebrow, already knowing where this was going. Chinny, she said flatly. Kamsi nodded, her smile widening. She's apparently a big shot now, owns a chain of businesses, lives abroad most of the time, but she came back for this. Can you believe it? After everything that happened back in the day, she's still one of the most talked about people from our set. Dara's stomach tightened at the mention of Chinny's name. Part of her had expected this, but hearing it out loud made the memories flood back even stronger. She couldn't help but wonder what seeing Chinny would feel like after all these years. Had she changed? Did she still carry that same sense of power and intimidation that she had wielded so effortlessly in their school days? The hall was buzzing with excitement when they entered. Women were milling around in small groups, catching up on 2 decades of life. Old friends exchanged hugs and laughs, while others looked at each other with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Dara felt a wave of relief wash over her. At least she wasn't the only one feeling awkward. Let's grab a seat, Kamsi suggested, leading Dara to a row near the front. As they settled in, Dara's eyes scanned the room, searching for the one person she both dreaded and needed to see. And then she saw her. Chinny stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by a small group of women who looked at her with admiration. She hadn't changed much. Her figure was still striking, and her aura of confidence and control was palpable, even from a distance. But there was something different in her face, something harder, colder. Time had refined her beauty, but it had also sharpened the edges of her presence. Dara's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what she had expected, but seeing Chinny like this brought everything back. The almost suffocating night in the senior dormitory, the gifts, the pressure, the whispers. She felt a sudden urge to leave, to run from the hall and never look back. But then Chinny's eyes met hers across the room. For a moment it felt as though time had stopped. The noise of the reunion faded into the background, and it was just the two of them, Dara and Chinny, facing each other after 20 long years. Chinny's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile, and she began walking toward them. Dara's throat tightened as Chinny approached. Kamsi, completely unaware of the tension building between them, continued chatting about old school memories, oblivious to the dark history between her two friends. Dara, my dear. Chinny's voice cut through the air, smooth and deep. It was the same voice that had sent chills down her spine all those years ago. It's been a long time. Dara forced a smile, standing up to greet her. Yes, it has, she replied, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. Chinny leaned in, offering a soft embrace that felt more like an act of possession than friendship. As they pulled apart, Chinny's eyes scanned Dara, as though appraising her after all these years. There was something in her gaze, something that told Dara she hadn't forgotten. I've been following your success in Lagos, Chinny said smoothly, her smile never faltering. You've done well for yourself. Thanks, Dara replied, trying to keep the conversation neutral. I've been busy. Chinny's eyes glinted. Busy indeed. But I wonder, are you still running away from things you don't understand? Dara stiffened, the comment striking deeper than she had anticipated. I'm not running from anything, Chinny, she said firmly, meeting her gaze. Chinny chuckled softly, the sound dripping with amusement. We'll see about that. Before Dara could respond, Kamsi broke in, completely oblivious to the tension. Look at us. The three of us back together after all these years. Can you believe it? We should catch up properly later. Chinny's smile widened, and she gave Dara one last look before turning back to her group. I'll see you around, Dara, she said, her tone laced with something unreadable. As Chinny walked away, Dara exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Kamsi continued chatting excitedly beside her, but Dara's mind was elsewhere, replaying the strange encounter over and over again. The rest of the reunion passed in a blur. Old classmates laughed and reminisced, sharing stories of their lives and the wild memories they had from boarding school. But Dara found herself distracted, her mind unable to shake the unsettling feeling that Chinny's presence had stirred in her. Something was off. As the event wound down, Dara made her way to the school's courtyard, seeking a moment of peace. The familiar trees and benches brought back more memories than she cared to admit, and for a moment she closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift back to her teenage years. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Opening her eyes, she turned to see a woman approaching, someone she vaguely recognized from their time in school. Dara, right? The woman asked, her voice quiet. Dara nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. I need to talk to you, the woman said, glancing around nervously. It's about Chinny. There are things you don't know. Things that happened after we all left school. Dara's curiosity piqued as she studied the woman standing before her. She was older now, but there was something familiar in her features, perhaps the remnants of a face she had once known in passing at St. Joseph's. The woman glanced over her shoulder again, as if wary of being overheard. What is it? Dara asked, her voice low, sensing that whatever the woman had to say wouldn't be pleasant. The woman hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around before finally speaking. Chinny, she's not who she used to be. There are things about her that people don't talk about, but I think you should know. Dara felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? There's a reason she came back for this reunion, the woman continued. She hasn't been living abroad all this time like everyone thinks. She's been in hiding. There were incidents. Serious ones. People got hurt. Dara's heart pounded in her chest. What kind of incidents? The woman sighed, her gaze full of regret. Chinny was involved in some shady dealings after she left school. It started small illegal businesses, smuggling, but then things escalated. There were rumors of a cult, strange rituals, and people who crossed her ended up disappearing. No one ever proved anything, but those who know her well, they're afraid. Dara's mind reeled at the information. It was hard to reconcile the image of the polished, confident woman she had seen earlier with this dark past. But something about the woman's tone, her fear, her urgency, made it difficult to dismiss. Why are you telling me this? Dara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I don't think you're safe, the woman replied, her eyes filled with concern. She hasn't forgotten what happened between you two all those years ago. She holds grudges and she's not the type to forgive. Dara's thoughts raced. Had Chinny's strange behavior at the reunion been more than just an attempt to intimidate her? Was there something more sinister at play? And if so, what did Chinny want from her after all these years? I can't stay long, the woman said, glancing over her shoulder again. But be careful, Dara. Don't underestimate her. She's dangerous. With that, the woman turned and hurried off, leaving Dara standing alone in the courtyard, her heart pounding and her mind filled with questions. Dara spent the rest of the reunion in a haze, her mind preoccupied with the warning she had just received. Every time she glanced in Chinny's direction, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Was it possible that the girl she had once known had turned into someone dangerous, someone capable of the things the woman had suggested? After the reunion ended, Dara returned to her hotel room, her mind still buzzing. She tried to focus on the positive aspects of the event, reconnecting with old friends, reliving fond memories, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that something darker was looming just out of sight. The next day, Dara woke up feeling restless. The reunion had stirred up more than just nostalgia. It had unearthed old wounds and buried fears that she had long thought were behind her. She decided to take a walk around the city to clear her head, hoping that some distance from the school would help her process everything. As she strolled through the bustling streets of Acoma, she couldn't help but replay the events of the past few days in her mind. The strange encounter with Chinny, the warning from the woman, the lingering tension that seemed to follow her wherever she went. It all felt too surreal, like something out of a nightmare. She paused at a street vendor's stall, absent-mindedly browsing through the colorful fabrics on display. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Hesitant, she answered the call. "Hello, Dara," a familiar voice said on the other end, sending a chill down her spine. It was Chinny. "How did you get my number?" Dara asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Chinny laughed softly, the sound unsettling in its familiarity. "I have my ways. I wanted to see how you were doing after the reunion. You seemed distracted." Dara's pulse quickened. "I'm fine," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Just busy." There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment Dara thought the line had gone dead. But then Chinny spoke again, her voice lower this time, more intense. "You've always been good at staying out of things that don't concern you, haven't you, Dara? But I wonder how long will that last?" Dara's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," Chinny replied, her tone chilling. "You were always so quick to run away when things got tough. But this time there's no running. We're not in school anymore, and the rules have changed." Before Dara could respond, the line went dead, leaving her standing frozen in place, the phone still pressed to her ear. The days that followed were filled with tension. Dara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She had taken to locking her doors and checking her surroundings wherever she went, but the sense of dread lingered. Chinny's words haunted her, replaying in her mind like a broken record. One evening, as Dara sat in her living room, trying to focus on some work, she heard a knock at her door. Her heart skipped a beat. It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, it was Kamsi. "Dara, open up. It's me." Kamsi's voice was bright and cheerful, but Dara hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to trust even her closest friends. Finally, she unlocked the door and let Kamsi in. "What are you doing here so late?" she asked, her voice tight with nerves. "I was in the area and thought I'd drop by," Kamsi replied, stepping inside with a wide smile. "You've been so quiet since the reunion. I wanted to make sure everything's okay." Dara forced a smile, trying to hide the turmoil swirling inside her. "I'm fine, just busy." Kamsi gave her a knowing look. "Come on, Dara. We've known each other for how long now? You can't fool me. Something's up." Dara sighed, her defenses crumbling. She couldn't keep the truth from Kamsi any longer. "It's Chinny," she confessed, sinking into the couch. "There's something off about her. I can't explain it, but I think she's dangerous." Kamsi's expression softened, and she sat down beside Dara. "I don't know what happened between you two all those years ago, but maybe you're overthinking it. People change, Dara. Maybe she's just trying to make amends." Dara shook her head. "It's more than that, Kamsi. There's something she's hiding, something dark. And I think it's coming for me." As the weeks passed, Dara's paranoia deepened. She began receiving strange, cryptic messages on her phone, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her every move. The tension that had started at the reunion had grown into something more sinister, more tangible. Her dreams were plagued with visions of Chinny, cold, calculating, always one step ahead. In these dreams, she was trapped in the suffocating mosquito net-covered bed, gasping for air as Chinny stood over her, smiling that same knowing smile. One night as Dara lay in bed tossing and turning, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Groggily, she picked it up and saw a new message from an unknown number. "You can't run forever." Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the message. She felt her throat tighten, her breath coming in short gasps. This was no coincidence. Chinny was playing with her, toying with her fear, and it was only getting worse. Desperate for answers, Dara decided it was time to confront Chinny once and for all. She needed to know what was really going on, and she couldn't live in fear any longer. The next morning she called Kamsi. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm going to see Chinny, and I need you to come with me." Kamsi hesitated for a moment but finally agreed. "Okay, but are you sure about this?" "I don't have a choice," Dara replied. "I need to know the truth." Dara and Kamsi stood outside the sleek, modern house where Chinny was staying. It was a far cry from the old boarding school dormitories they had once shared, but the tension between them felt as thick as it had back then. As Dara raised her hand to knock, the door creaked open before her fist could land. Standing in the doorway was Chinny, her face expressionless yet sharp, as if she had been expecting them. "Dara," Chinny said softly, her voice silky smooth. Her gaze then shifted to Kamsi, who stood nervously beside Dara. "Come in. I've been waiting." A shiver ran down Dara's spine. The eerie calm in Chinny's voice unsettled her, but there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside with Kamsi following closely behind. The house was meticulously organized, everything in its proper place. It had a cold, sterile quality that felt far from a home. Chinny led them to a sitting room where large windows let in too much light, casting long shadows on the walls. "Why are you doing this?" Dara blurted out, unable to hold her words any longer. "The messages, the warnings. Why can't you just leave the past behind?" Chinny's lips curled into a small smile as she crossed her arms and leaned back against the wall, her expression unreadable. "Leave the past behind," she echoed. "How can I, when you were the one who abandoned me when I needed you most? Do you even know what you did to me?" Dara felt her stomach drop. "What are you talking about? That was years ago. We were kids. We were more than kids." Chinny interrupted, her voice rising. "You and we were supposed to be together. You were the one person I trusted. You were supposed to be my partner. But you rejected me. You left me to face everything alone, Dara." A heavy silence fell over the room. Dara swallowed hard, her mind reeling as the truth of Chinny's words sank in. She had never seen things from Chinny's perspective. Back then she had been afraid, unsure of what Soupy truly meant or what she felt. She had distanced herself out of fear, not realizing how deeply it had affected Chinny. "I'm sorry," Dara said softly, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what you were going through. I was scared." Chinny shook her head, her eyes darkening. "You didn't care. You let them come after me, spread rumors, call me possessed. You let them make me the villain. I didn't want that for you," Dara insisted, her voice trembling. "I didn't know what to do." Chinny's smile widened, but it was cold, devoid of any warmth. "It's too late for apologies, Dara. I learned to live with the pain, with the betrayal. But I didn't come back for closure. I came back to make sure you felt what I felt." Kamsi, who had been silent up until now, shifted uncomfortably. "Chinny, whatever happened back then, it doesn't have to define you now. You can move on from this. We all can." Chinny's eyes flicked to Kamsi, a mocking glint in her gaze. "You think it's that simple? You think I can just walk away after everything?" "I think you have a choice," Kamsi said softly but firmly. "We always have a choice." For a long moment Chinny said nothing. The tension in the room thickened, and Dara's heart raced, unsure of what would happen next. Chinny stood still, her body tense as though caught in an internal battle. Dara could see the anger in her eyes, but beneath it, there was also pain, deep unresolved pain. She had been carrying this grudge for years, nursing her wounds until they had festered into something dark and twisted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Chinny spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I loved you, Dara, more than anyone else. And you broke me. Dara felt tears prick her eyes. I was a coward. I see that now. But hurting me won't fix what happened. We can't change the past, but maybe we can start again. We can heal. Chinny's expression wavered for a moment, as if she was considering the possibility. But then she shook her head slowly, her eyes cold once again. No. It's too late for that. Before Dara could say anything more, Chinny turned and walked to a cabinet by the far wall. She opened it, and Dara's blood ran cold when she saw what was inside. Papers, photos, evidence of everything Chinny had been involved in. There were faces of people Dara didn't recognize, notes scribbled in Chinny's familiar handwriting, and other disturbing items that suggested she had become entangled in a world far darker than Dara had ever imagined. You don't understand, Chinny said quietly, pulling out a piece of paper and holding it up for Dara to see. I've done things, Dara. There's no going back. Dara's heart sank. Chinny. But before she could say more, Chinny moved suddenly, grabbing a small object from the shelf and holding it tightly. Dara saw the flash of metal and realized with horror that it was a knife. Kamsi stepped forward, her hand raised. Chinny, put it down. Please. Chinny's eyes were wild, the pain and anger threatening to consume her. I won't let them hurt me again. Dara's voice trembled as she spoke. We're not here to hurt you, Chinny. We want to help. But Chinny's grip on the knife tightened, and for a moment Dara feared the worst. Then something shifted. Chinny's face crumpled, and the knife fell from her hand, clattering to the floor. She sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Dara rushed forward, kneeling beside her, unsure of what to say, but knowing that this was a moment of vulnerability that they couldn't afford to waste. Kamsi knelt down as well, gently placing a hand on Chinny's shoulder. You don't have to carry this burden anymore. Chinny cried for what felt like hours, and when her sobs finally subsided, she looked up at Dara with red-rimmed eyes. I don't know how to fix this. Dara squeezed her hand. We'll figure it out together. It took months for Chinny to begin the process of healing. She sought therapy, cut ties with her dangerous past, and slowly started to rebuild her life. Dara and Kamsi were there for her every step of the way, offering support and understanding. The three women, once divided by the past, found a way to reconnect. Their relationship was far from perfect, and there were still difficult conversations to be had, but they were all committed to moving forward. Dara realized that forgiveness was not just about letting go of the past. It was about making room for a future where healing could happen. She had made mistakes, but she was determined to learn from them. As for Chinny, she had a long road ahead of her, but she was no longer walking it alone. Years later, as Dara looked back on everything that had happened, she couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. The reunion had been a catalyst for unearthing old wounds, but it had also been an opportunity for growth, for all of them. Chinny had left the country to start a new life, one free from the shadows of her past. Dara and Kamsi remained close, their friendship stronger than ever. It wasn't the ending that Dara had expected, but in many ways it was better. They had faced their demons, confronted their fears, and come out stronger on the other side. And in the end, that was all that mattered.